We know that fire is a natural process and it's important to the health and the renewal of the forest. What we're working at through this project is bringing fire back to the land in contained ways. What is Kluane National Park and Reserve? It's a stunning landscape in southwestern Yukon. And it's one of the largest national parks in Canada. It protects the highest peak in Canada, Mount Logan. It also protects the Boreal Forest.
We've had a significant spruce bark beetle outbreak here in the 90s and 2000s, which really took a toll on a lot of our mature spruce tree population. The younger trees are able to pitch that beetle out more, but we haven't had fire to have those young trees come up.
Once that infestation happened, trees started to die off, and the forest is what we call standing gray. Rather than a green forest, a gray forest. This recent outbreak was really impactful and widespread and likely driven by climate change. We had warm, dry summers and drought. In 1943, the Kluane Game Sanctuary was established. It's a painful time for First Nations. Now we look back on it because people were separated from their land and really pushed out of the park. Kluane National Park and Reserve was then officially established in the 70s.
My mother and dad actually trapped in here before it became a game sanctuary and then before it became a park. So I do have a concern culturally and historically about the area. We need to recognize that there is a culture and there is a history of fire with First Nations. They would set fire to a single spruce tree wherever they could find it, and you could see the smoke for a long ways away, and then everybody would get ready for the trade.
Well, we're learning more about the fire history of this area, working with the Canadian Forest Service. And what we're finding is there's a pretty distinct change in the amount of fire on the land, where fire occurred and how frequently it happened.
We were trying to help answer these questions around where does fire fit in this ecosystem? What role did it play? How do the forests of today reflect what happened in the past? We started with black and white photos from generally the 1800s that were taken by land surveyors. Areas that are burned will have these differences where like maybe the surface looks a little bit smoother, or younger trees will be a different shade than older trees. And then it's really the field work where we need to go and confirm what that disturbance was. Once we get there, we do a lot of work, mostly dendrochronologies, the study of tree rings, to identify key markers in those rings that really confirm for us that it was a fire. In this region, there's a lightning shadow. So there's very little lightning naturally igniting fires. And it means that a lot of the fire in this region was created by humans. So we really came out of it understanding that there had been humans interacting with fire on this landscape for a really long time. With the creation of the game reserve and then the park, there was, of course, then an associated big reduction in the amount of fire.
Well, Alder Creek here has been selected as a place for prescribed burn, and I have the concerns that everybody has that we do it right. The thing is that there's some places that could and should have, the opportunity to have regrowth, but we have to have trust in the fact that we're going to do it right.
When we had the Canadian Forest Service on the ground observing fire behavior, they put sensors in place and record the fire as it built and spread.
There are 3 different thermocouple probes, We set them up in a triangular shape. They record observations of the temperature at the location. So just by using that triangle, we could hopefully understand how the fire front itself was moving, in what direction it was spreading. It travels in ways that we may not always expect it to, but it also gives us an idea of what exactly was happening in that fire.
We were hoping for a forecast that was a little warmer, a little drier. We had a team of about 30 people assembled to prepare for the prescribed fire, and we were working with Yukon Wildland Fire Management and wet down the perimeter of the area that was to be burned. And fire crews at the ready. And then to actually ignite the fire is by air using a helicopter. It was actually quite a wet fall last year, so the conditions weren't ideal for fire. And we found when we did light the test fire, it didn't have the desired fire behavior and the kind of rate of spread that we were looking for.
There's a real big crew of people who are behind this. I'm amazed at how many people are involved with all the expertise that we have. The respect is there for the concerns of the people who are here in the First Nations. You can see that this valley might be a place where wildlife is going to move back into again for a while.
It was pretty successful to have that cooperation with park staff, partner agencies, community members, knowledge holders from the First Nation. And so we can build on that experience for the future when we have our next prescribed fire.
Success for this project doesn't necessarily mean a full burn. All the learning that we've done, it goes a long way, and I think it really builds a base for future fire programs and getting the information out there for community members, members of the Yukon, and members of all of Canada, so that we can learn to manage our forests better and in a right way.